So one of the things that is really fun is I like to watch TV, and there's a lot of shows I like to watch. And one of the shows that I kind of have a guilty pleasure with is a show called Penn and Teller Fool Us. Guys ever watched that or even heard of that show? It's been on for quite a while, several seasons, and I watch that all the time, and I have my DVR set for it, and I love it. I love a good magician. I love a good illusionist when they do some amazing things, and Penn and Teller is one of my favorite because sometimes they do stuff with lots of blood and gross stuff, and that sure is fun when they do that, and it's awesome. Like, oh look, we're going to drill a nail through someone's hand, and oh look, and it's like, and it's so much fun. So I thought maybe in light of Penn and Teller, maybe I would give it a shot. Because I figured, why not? Why can't I, make something like disappear or something? Wouldn't that be fun if I could do that? Like just an average Joe Blow like me. Wouldn't that be a great thing? Wouldn't you guys love to see that? Sure. One person, yes! That's all I needed. That's all I needed. If it was going to be 0, I was going to skip it. But okay, for you, we will do this. We'll see if we can do this. So what I have is paper sack. Okay, so, and then I have in here a nice grand old Coke bottle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the Coke bottle in here, and what I usually see the magicians do is that they wave their hand and then it disappears. All right, let's see if it works. All right, so I wave my hand and it disappeared. Okay, we'll make it come back. Maybe be more impressed with that. So I wave my hand backwards, and then it's back. I did it. You guys really don't seem impressed. Okay, I'll up it up. I'll up it. I can up it up a notch. Not a problem. I will, maybe you'll be more impressed if because I have the bottle in here. So if I were to make it go from this bag to this bag, would that be impressive? Okay, you're fine with that. Okay, cool. So here we go. So on a count of 3, I want you guys to say it with me because I can't wave my hands anymore, so I need like voices. I think voices will work. Usually Penn and Teller gets audience participation, right? So voices, ready? So count with me. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Now let's make it go back. Let's count backwards. Ready? 3, 2, 1, and oh, look at that! It's back! How awesome was that? Man, you guys are hard to impress. I don't remember it being this hard for Penn and Teller. Okay, I got an idea. Usually they say, okay, here's a bag, here's a bottle, cool. So there's nothing up this sleeve, right? And then there's nothing up this sleeve. So now we'll make it switch sides, all right? So you guys saw me flipperoo, didn't you? Okay, well what we'll do is a different idea then. And we'll do something a little bit different. Oh, now you're impressed. I see how it is. Don't worry. I still got it. Yeah, figure that one out. Let your minds think on that for a while. So here's the thing about what is going to be happening in our next text. In case you're wondering, what is that pastor doing? Is John the Baptist is struggling with this idea of Jesus because he is not what he expected. Because there are times in life when things happen that we do not expect. Or there are times in life where just things do not end up the way we anticipate. They end up in a whole different direction. And it becomes a surprise, either a pleasant surprise or a really disappointing surprise, but that we have those moments. And by looking at your faces, I can tell that I'm not alone with that statement. That you've all had those moments in life where things did not turn out like you thought they would. Maybe you thought you would graduate from college and get a job related to your major just to find out you don't. Maybe you're one of those that end up finding yourself a job that you could have gotten without ever going to college in the first place. Maybe you're one of those that have just thought that you would get married and that everything would be your oyster just to find out that your new wife comes home on a broom. Or maybe your ladies thought that you were going to marry this guy and he was going to be that knight in shining armor, and come to find out he was more like a potato than not. Okay, and so you just find out sometimes that things are not what you expected. And maybe that also happens when it comes to God. Maybe that also happens when it comes to Jesus, that we want something, we expect something, we anticipate something, and then it does not happen the way we thought. And then we're left with this notion and naggingness inside of us. What happened that went wrong? Did anything go wrong? Was I in the wrong? Did God not come through? Did he not answer? Or why is there a purpose to the way he answered? What's happening? Is this even in the end worth it? Or am I wasting my time? So those are the questions we're going to be looking at today. And as we're going through what it means to be a member of God's army, is what Matthew is kind of about, is if we're going to join the kingdom of God and we're going to be a soldier in his infantry, so to speak, we got to figure out how to deal with all these issues, especially when our commander-in-chief or our general in God's army, God himself, ends up doing things and asking for things or not involving us in things that we think he should. And that it ends up being different than what we expected. And so last week, we had looked at how Jesus was going through boot camp with his disciples. And he was trying to get them ready. And he tried to tell them, he said, hey, of all his 70 plus disciples, he grabbed 12. He set them aside. He made them apostles. He promoted them. He made them instead of a foot soldier, he made them like lieutenant or captain. So he promoted them, and he tells them that they are going to go into rough territory. They're going behind enemy lines. They're going to be like sheep among wolves, and it's going to be rough. People are going to hurt them. They're going to beat them. They're going to reject them. This is not a happy sermon from Jesus. Okay, you don't leave this boot camp of Jesus feeling all fluffy and everything's going to be great. Instead, he says, life is going to suck. Deal with it. That's what he tells them. And he tells them to persevere, to absolutely persevere, that God loves them, God values them above all else, he values people above all other parts of creation, and that he is going to be present, he's going to see them through, and that Jesus came not for peace, which ruins our Christmas songs. He said specifically, I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, and that it was going to divide the followers of God and the not followers of God, and that it was going to end up dividing even families, where mom and dad might reject their children because of their faith, where brothers and sisters might fight and quarrel because of the issue of their faith, because one does not want them to follow Jesus and the other one is going to be following Jesus no matter the cost. And so that's that sword that's coming in. And it's going to be rough socially. It's going to be rough publicly. It's going to be rough personally. And so that was Jesus' boot camp. And then, after he's all done talking to his apostles, it leaves us, the readers, reading this going, man, are they really going to be able to pull this off? Can they persevere? Can they hold it together? Is it possible for the followers of God to have that type of patience, that type of perseverance, that type of dedication, that type of determination? Will they do it? And then chapter 11, verse 1. We get a familiar chap, John the Baptist. Okay, so John the Baptist enters the picture. Again, we haven't heard about him in quite a while. Matthew spent a lot of time talking about Jesus, chapters and chapters about Jesus, which is cool. Okay, but now John the Baptist comes back, and it's interesting that John the Baptist, the mighty JTB, is doubting. The mighty man of faith who dressed in like camels-like clothing, that walked around eating honey and locusts and just was out in the wilderness. People were going to threaten his life, and he's boldly declaring God. This was a guy that's like a powerhouse of faith. He makes Billy Graham look like a wuss. He's the one that makes every pastor look like a chicken. It is this man, this John the Baptist, that is this awesome man of faith. We can look up to him because he's amazing, and here he begins to doubt. and wonders if Jesus is even the one. His faith seems to be a little bit shaken. Check this out, verses 1 through 6. So if you have your Bibles, please open those, or your phone. Pull that out and scan over to it if you have an app. Bible apps are all over the place. Enjoy that. Go to Bible Hub if nothing else. Check this out here on the screen as well for you. Verses 1 through 6. After Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. When John the Baptist, who was in prison, he's been arrested? We didn't hear about this. Matthew left that out. He'll come back to it later. Don't worry. Matthew's not in chronological order on purpose. It's more like Pulp Fiction. Things are kind of crazy, and it's kind of fun for a theological reason. So when John, who was in prison, death sentence, by the way, this is a prison sentence where you lose your head over. Let's see who knows their history. John gets beheaded. Okay, so when John, who is in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, heard about Jesus, he went and he sent his disciples to ask him, Jesus, are you the one who is to come? Which is interesting because John preached that one is coming greater than I. John preached, one is coming of whom I'm not even worthy to untie his sandals. John preached that the Messiah is this Jesus. And when Jesus went to John the Baptist to get baptized, Matthew chapter 4, Matthew said, I am not worthy to baptize you. You should be baptizing me. And Jesus says, oh, get over yourself and dunk me and keep me under until the bubbles quit. Okay, that's not in the original text, but you get the idea. Baptize me. And so John did, and the heavens opened up, and the Spirit of God descended on Jesus, and the voice of God declared, this is my Son, in whom I'm well pleased. And on it went. John knows who Jesus is, and here he is saying, are you the one who is to come? Are you the one? Or should we expect someone else? So that's the message Jesus received. So Jesus replies, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised. The good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me. And so this is the recap, or this is the message that Jesus gives John. And so John is going to receive this message in just a little bit, but he, until then, is waiting for a reply and wondering, could this be Jesus? Could this Jesus really be that Messiah? Because you see, John also had another part of his sermon that he liked to preach, that the Messiah, when he comes, will be coming with a sword and with an axe and will be chopping trees down, not literally, but metaphorically. It's not that Jesus is Mr. Deforestation. It's that Jesus is going to be coming to bring judgment. The Messiah would come to bring complete judgment, would overthrow the evil governments and evil empires and establish his kingdom in full on the earth. And Jesus has come, but it appears Jesus has more of an ambulance ministry than a military ministry. It appears that Jesus isn't bringing a lot of judgment. So John is confused. John is confused. Why is Jesus not like he expected? Why is Jesus not doing what he thought? And when John, who's a good guy, is doing everything he's supposed to be doing, finds himself on death row in prison, and he's wondering why. If he's a good guy, why is he there? Why are the good suffering? And why are the wicked prospering? What is going on? And so John is questioning, and John is sending out this message to Jesus. And Jesus says, listen to my words, see my actions, know who I am. That's Jesus' reply to John. And so I want to be able to hit this doubt issue a little bit further. I want us to look at this in more detail because there's something going on here that I think we can definitely learn from and can glean from and benefit from. And that is, first off, probing for proof. I love the fact that John asks Jesus, are you the one? John does not quit. John does not reject Jesus. John does not reject the church. He doesn't reject his faith. John is not struggling with unbelief. He is struggling with doubt. And there's a very big difference between the two. So John has doubt, not disbelief. So check this out. Every single one of us here, it doesn't matter whether you've been a Christian for like 50 years, or if you've been a Christian for 50 days, or if you're not even sure if you are a Christian, not even sure if you want to be a Christian. Different people here, different walks at this point in time. People online, same thing. All of us here and all of us online that are watching, all will have questions. No matter how much scripture you memorize, no matter how many sermons you hear, no matter how many books you read, no matter how long you've lived, no matter how much you have experienced, no matter how much has gone on, how much truth you've embraced, you're still going to occasionally have a question. Something's going to happen in society, in life, to you, to people around you, in this nation, in this world, to which you're going to be puzzled about. In fact, we can even take a quick poll when it comes to things happening in this world and in this nation, in this state, in this country, in this city, in this church, in your home. Anybody that's a little bit puzzled about something? You don't have to say what it is, but would you say there are things that just don't quite make sense? And you don't know why exactly they are the way they are. And boy, you wish something would be different. Okay, and I'm saying no one's willing to raise their hand, but you're definitely willing to nod. And I'm just like watching. It looks like the ocean with waves. Just, yeah, okay, you got it. Okay, and so we all have at some points the idea of a question. And when it comes to our faith, same thing. We're all going to get to the point of having a question. And there's a difference between doubt and disbelief. And that difference is this. Doubt says that I am confused. I know this to be true, but this little detail doesn't seem to fit. They don't mesh together. And so I have questions. I am struggling with some doubt issues. And so I want to probe for proof. So doubt says, I don't understand, help me understand. Disbelief says, I don't understand, in fact, I actually do understand. The whole thing's a fraud, I want to throw it all out. I don't want any answers. There's no answer that could even satisfy me. I reject the whole thing. It's like the difference between having a question and then questioning. Having a question says that I have a question, I want clarification. I want to know more. I would like to understand this. Questioning says you are actually already guilty. I already know that you're wrong, and I'm just going to constantly ask question after question after question to trip you up, to validate my position. So I'm already starting with you just wrong. Asking a question says, I believe this to be right, but I don't understand. I have some doubts. Can you help me? So you see the difference between doubt and disbelief, between asking a question and questioning. See, John the Baptist is not trying to trip Jesus up. He's not trying to trip up the other apostles. He's not trying to trip anyone up. He's not trying to prove the whole thing a fraud. He just wants to know before he dies, was it worth it? He wants some clarification, some reassurance. He is probing for proof. He is probing for understanding. That's what he wants. And so what Jesus offers him, in a sense, is to have patience with perseverance. In other words, don't throw the whole thing out just because it's different than you expected. In other words, don't quit just because it's a little different than you anticipated. Have patience to the end, that in the end, it is absolutely 100% worth it. In the end, it is completely worth the sacrifice, the heartache. It is worth all the discipline. It is worth it completely to the end. That's Jesus' reassurance to John the Baptist. Notice Jesus doesn't say, blessed are he who never doubts. Notice Jesus never says, blessed is the one who never asks questions. Instead, Jesus says, yeah, I am he. Yes, I am God in the flesh. See the evidence in action. See lives being changed. See people being transformed. See things being different. Different than you expected, but they're still different. See God at work. That's Jesus' message back to John. And then Jesus answers a very odd question out of the blue. He asked the question about who is the greatest human who has ever been born. And I went ahead and had fun with this. Earlier this week on Facebook, I asked this question. I sent out a meme to all my Facebook peeps. I got I got hundreds of them on there, so I got several interesting answers. And I just asked the question, who would you consider to be the greatest human to have ever been born? And one person said George Lucas, which I was like, oh yeah, he'd be in my top 5. Star Wars? Absolutely. Lucas is on my list. Ding. Okay. Some people said Mother Teresa. Some people said Billy Graham. Then there were some of those, hard-hitting Bible people. They were like the Apostle Paul. A lot of people just said Jesus, 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 right on down the list. Like 15 people said Jesus on that. And it's interesting that when Jesus answers the question, he doesn't say himself. It's really fascinating. And so maybe you could ask yourself in your mind real quick, who is the greatest human to ever be born? Would you say Mother Teresa? Gandhi? Would you say, like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln? Would you say George Lucas with me? Woohoo! Not as the greatest, but as up there. Would you say Billy Graham or Chuck Colson? Who is the greatest human ever to be born? Here's what Jesus says, verses 7 through 15. So as John's disciples were leaving, they asked Jesus, got the answer. So they're leaving. Jesus began to speak to the crowd. I'm wondering if the crowd started murmuring to each other and started saying, John's doubting? What a wuss. Did you hear John the Baptist, that guy out in the field that was baptizing people? He didn't know if Jesus was the one, even though he was saying he was the one earlier. What a hypocrite. What a loser. And maybe they're starting to question it. Because after all, isn't it really quick for people that when you say one thing, and then later you question that one thing, and so you say something different, or you ask a question, everybody jumps on it. And they're like, you hypocrite, you just contradicted yourself. No, I just have questions, or certain thoughts have changed. I noticed that amongst presidential candidates and politicians, that if somebody held one view one time, a decade goes by and they hold a different view, everybody jumps on them. They say, look at this person, they're inconsistent. And it's like, well, can't things change? Can't perspectives change? Can't we struggle with an issue and find that we end up in a different place than where we started? Can't that happen? And instead of just yelling at people about it, can't we help them through that? But instead, these people are started mocking John. And so Jesus speaks into that. Fascinating. So Jesus turns to the crowd and he starts asking them, what did you go out into the wilderness to see? He's asking them, what were you expecting when you went and you saw John? What did you go out to see? A reed swayed by the wind? Now, were you expecting to see a floozy out there just kind of going nuts, just wish-washy and swinging around? If not, then what did you go out to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, because John wore a burlap sack. That's what, he was not dressed in the finest of fine. Okay, so no, those who wear fine clothes are in the king's palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes. Jesus calls John the Baptist a prophet, like that of Elijah, like that of Elisha, like that of Moses, like that of Abraham. That's what Jesus calls John the Baptist. He says, what then, a prophet? Yes, and I tell you more than a prophet. This is the one to whom it was written, I will send my messenger ahead of you who will prepare your way before you. So truly I tell you, among those born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Of all the answers that I got off of Facebook, it was interesting, nobody said John the Baptist. They all said Jesus, and Jesus said John the Baptist. John the Baptist, the greatest human to that point who has ever been born? That seems kind of odd, and maybe everybody else thought that was a little bit odd. John the Baptist? So Jesus goes on, yet, Oh, this is really fun. Yet is like a fancy but. Okay, but is one of those erasing words that changes things, takes you into a different direction. Yet is a fancy but, a fancy conjunction like that. Yet, whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven, see this, whoever is least in God's army, in the kingdom of heaven, is what? Greater than John. That's weird. That's weird. That whoever is the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has been subjected to violence, and violent people have been raiding it. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John. And if you were willing to accept it, he is the Elijah who was to come. Whoever has ears, let them hear. What Jesus ended up saying is there was a prophecy that said Elijah would come, and everyone thought at that time that Elijah would somehow be resurrected or somehow would appear as a form of an angel or something. And then Jesus says, no, that was fulfilled in John the Baptist. It wasn't that it was Elijah exact, it's that it was Elijah in message, Elijah in type, Elijah in form, but not Elijah literal. Okay, and so that's how Jesus was saying that was fulfilled. And so here's what's interesting. We struggle with this a little bit because of how we define greatness. And we screwed that up because we don't understand what it means to be called great. So let me help unpack this a little bit for us. Here's how Americans, Western civilization, define greatness. Us all included. Here's how we define greatness. I'm not going to give you a simple word. I'm going to give you a phrase or a picture, if you will. First, we see ourselves as individuals. We usually don't see ourselves in the corporate identity. We see ourselves as individuals. We're all about being unique, and we're all about being us, and we all are on the quest to find out who we are. We're all on a quest to find out what we're about. We're all on a quest, and what we do is on that quest, we make a vision for ourselves. We make a plan. We have goals that we set. And what we do with that goal is we say, I aspire to achieve certain things. I have a goal that I want to be not here, but at this location or at this place in society. That I want this job, to have this family, at this type of a house, to be living in this type of a way, with this type of an income. And to get there, we then develop our plans on how we're going to get there. And so we set ourselves up with academia and going to college, and we do all these things, and we try to go to certain jobs that might open up different doorways and paths and build bridges that will get us to our ultimate destination. And then, after we're all done with that, when we get to the end days of our lives, we reflect back on everything, and we ask ourselves, did we really get there? Did we really achieve everything we set out for? Can we? And if we did, we might call ourselves great. And if we did it, we might have regret and wish we were greater than we were, that we had made different choices, that we would have done different directions, would have said yes instead of no, or no instead of yes, that maybe things would have been different and we would have had a better life, a better direction. And then we tried to build up a new legacy in that final lap of our race of life before we cross the finish line of death, hoping that we might be able to get a different legacy, better than what we've seen, because we recognize that we've sown not good seeds, and therefore we are reaping up not good fruit, and we are hoping we have a last chance in the vineyard to get nice produce from our sowing and reaping. That maybe we could have something that we could define as ourselves as being great or worthwhile. That's how we define great in our society. Doesn't that sound about right? And that sounds like about a lot of our lives at this point. People who live with any type of regret, that's how they define greatness. As having a vision for oneself and aspiring to achieve it. And what that is actually a selfish view of life. Because what that's all about is me. It's all about you. It's all about that individual. Okay, and John the Baptist never, ever set a vision for his life. John the Baptist never, ever set up a goal and never set up a plan working to try to get there. That wasn't what he did. Now, I'm not saying that goal planning is bad. I'm not saying that goal setting is bad. I'm not saying that going to college is bad. I went to college too many times. I graduated 3 times, okay? And even sometimes have thoughts about going back a 4th time to get yet another degree because I want to learn and I want to grow in my understanding, and that's the best place for me to go to do it. And so I'm not saying all that's bad. We have people here that have been to college. Hoo-yah, good job. We have people here that are currently attending college and they're back. I'm so glad you're back, man. Love you, man. And so I'm not saying to drop out. Man, you better stay in. I'm going to kick you left ways from Sunday. I'm not talking about any of that. What I'm saying is that we tend to have greatness defined from a selfish point of view. And that John the Baptist didn't do that. It's not that he had a vision for his life. He had a calling by God on his life. And he wasn't about trying to become anything. He was all about being already a servant of God from the get-go. You see the difference that's there? Okay, that's the difference that's there between what he is doing and what we tend to do. Is that he recognizes that it's God first. And that everything is about God's calling on his life. Let me bring this down to a real easy grabbing level. Marriage. Why do people get married? Why? I get people that come to me for premarital counseling. That's the first question I ask them. I say, why do you want to get married? And always, 100% of the time, I've been doing counseling for 20 years. 100%, like 20 years? Yeah, seriously. I know I'm older than I look. But 100% of the time, they say, we want to get married because yeah, there it is. Now you guys are willing to say it. Because we love each other. To which I think in my head, boy, that's the worst reason to get married. Because I know that there will be days where you don't like your spouse. There will be days where the love is not there. And what happens then is that it's different than we expected, and I started hearing people coming back to me for divorce counseling with the phrase, we have fallen out of, because that's what their marriage was based on. A selfish understanding of love. That they have a goal, they have a vision, and if it does not achieve that vision that I have set for myself, the way love is expressed, the way love is communicated, and the way love is received, if I don't get that, then as far as I'm concerned, it's like I got a bad car contract and I want to trade it in, preferably for a younger model. And that's what happens. Because people look at marriage from that selfish vision point of view. They don't start with the phrase, I want to get married because God has called us to serve the kingdom together. I don't hear that. I don't hear that they are going to be stronger Christians together. They're going to benefit the church better together than they would apart. And that's, by the way, what Paul says is the calling of marriage in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. He calls it a spiritual gift, like that of evangelism, like that of prophecy and speaking and declaring and preaching and teaching. He calls it an actual spiritual gift. He says that some people have this gift and in others that gift. And what Paul is talking about is some people are called to be single and some people are called to be married. And that's their calling. And the question is, if you're going to get married, is that your calling? Because the purpose of spiritual gift is for the building and equipping of the saints and the edification of the church. So is your marriage going to benefit the church more than you two being single? That's the question. And if you're going to find that there's going to be no change whatsoever, then why waste your time? You might not be called. See the different outlook that's on life that way when you start asking yourself what the difference is between setting my own goal and what is God's calling. It might seem like simple trivia differences, but in the end, it's life-altering when you look at it from that perspective. That's the difference between John the Baptist and other people. That's the difference between the least in the kingdom, because the least in the kingdom are at least those who are willing to say that God has called them into the kingdom. At least they're willing to start by accepting God's calling, whatever it is, because that's the minimum requirement, is that God has called you, and that God has his hand on you, and that you're accepting the draft, and you're not leaving the country. And you're willing to join God's army. That's the least in the kingdom. That's why even the least is greater than John the Baptist. Because they're at a spot to be able to start fresh from the get-go and start going from there. So where are you at as an individual? You might say, well, I'm already married. I wish I had known about that before. Maybe I might have made different things. Now what? Well, good news is Paul answers that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Maybe read it. It'd be a good read for you. The whole chapter. Just read it. Like, really? The whole chapter? That's a lot of verses. Well, the Bible's a big book. Be glad I didn't say start at Genesis and let me know when you get to 1 Corinthians 7. That'd take a while. Just read 1 Corinthians 7. Paul ends up saying that if you're married, even to someone who is someone that maybe you weren't originally called to be with, now you are called to be with them because you're married, stay with them. And to serve God the best you can with who you're married with. Now, if they leave, whole different issue, but stay with them. Stay with them. Make it work to the best of your ability. That's the calling at that point. So hopefully you're beginning to get an understanding. It's not about just how you feel. It's not just about your own goals and what you want. It's God's calling. And sometimes God's calling isn't something that you're wanting or something that you're pleased about. Because sometimes he calls us to do difficult things. Sometimes it's simple things, like playing with a Coke bottle. Sometimes it's hard things, like standing up to injustice, like standing up for your faith when everyone else says to be quiet or step down. Maybe it means being that dad or being that mom when the kids are just little demons in the house and you just want to break and you aren't getting it. And you just got to step up because you're the adult, and that's what it means. Maybe it means a dozen different things. But that's God's calling. And it's hard and it's difficult. And it's going to require patience and perseverance. And so Jesus gives John the gift of encouragement. Because here's what's going to happen to each of us. We're going to get discouraged. There's this one hymn, and I love hymns. I really do. I love a lot of hymns. I love He Lives, and there's power in the blood. I love hymns. I really do. There's one hymn that I get frustrated with whenever it gets sung. It's What a Friend We Have in Jesus. I get frustrated with it because in one of the verses it said we should never get discouraged. What a big tripe of baloney. We are going to get discouraged, and to try to live a life avoiding discouragement is a waste of time because it's coming. And if we don't expect it, it's going to hit us in a way that will be unexpected, and then we're going to be shaken from it. We got to expect life is discouraging. You think it was discouraging for John the Baptist to be in jail because he told the truth about Jesus and God's expected morality? You think that was a happy thing for him to know that he's going to die? And John doesn't say, why am I here, God? What did I do to deserve such bad punishment? John doesn't do that. He just wants to make sure that Jesus was worth it. And so Jesus gives him encouragement. And to give someone encouragement means that you are giving courage when they are without it. So encouragement isn't flattery. When someone says, someone said it looked nice today, that was so encouraging. Well, that's flattery. It was a compliment. And that's nice. But in the end, it's not like you're lacking courage. And encouragement speaks courage into it and so Jesus' words allows John to go to the butcher's block with his head held high, knowing that in the end, it's worth it. That in the end, he's going to see God face to face, and he doesn't have to have regret about it. That in the end, all the sacrifice, all the pain, all the struggle is absolutely worth it. That's being given courage. to be able to stand unshakenly in your faith for God's honor, for his glory. That's the encouragement Jesus gives. That's the encouragement we need to give when we see people who are struggling. That's the encouragement we need to give. Let me show you something weird that's been going around, just to give you a good example of what this looks like, how we can be on the pursuit of proof and have the patience with perseverance without giving up. This is something that went around a few years ago, and it was all over the internet. It was on Facebook and on Twitter. It was just really, really popular, and it was put out by an atheist organization to try to say that Jesus was a fraud and never existed. Okay, and this was really popular. It came around Christmas, about maybe 3 years ago. I don't know if you saw this, comparing Jesus to Horus. Here's a zoom in on some of the details here. And it said stuff like this, that, hey, Horus was born of the virgin Isis. Horus had the birthday on December 25th. Horus had an eastern star that led 3 wise men to him when he was born. Horus was taken to Egypt to escape the wrath of Typhon. Horus was taught in the temple as a child. He was baptized by Anna the Baptizer at the age of 30. Horus had 12 disciples, performed miracles and walked on water. He raised Lazarus from the dead and was transfigured on a mountain. And so Horus, therefore, since he existed 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years before Jesus, obviously Jesus was a made-up fake carbon copy of Horus because the Egyptian god Horus was the original. So Jesus being plagiarism obviously cannot be God, and he's false because look at all the evidence. And that went around Facebook for quite a while. And I saw a lot of Christians lose their faith. A lot of people that went to church quit because they said, oh my goodness, look at the evidence on this. And people were shaken. I had family members and even 2 cousins that walked away from the faith because of this exact picture. And I saved it because I remembered this moment. And they asked me, they said, what do we do with this, John? And so I decided I'd do some research because I'm the type of guy that goes, based off John the Baptist. Well, it's kind of fun. This is the Baptist church. My name's John. I just want to keep my head, preferably. Okay, but I'm the type of guy that wants to go, and I preach this, and I'm showing this to show that I live it too, to probe for truth. So I researched. Knowing that Jesus is right, knowing that the Bible is right, I probed for truth. You know what I found out? This is really fun. That whole thing about Horus, 100% made up. Doesn't exist anywhere in ancient literature. A couple of atheists literally just took the story of Jesus, rewrote it with some different little changes of the names, and declared it truth. That's why there's absolutely no research cited, because there's no research to cite. And Ding Dong, who wrote this, actually went to an archaeology meeting for Egyptology, talked to people about it, and they laughed him out of the room because there's been never any type of historical evidence even coming close to even trying to claim something of these details. Isn't that hilarious? But people, rather than probing, they go, oh my gosh, my faith is shaken, and they never stop to ask. Here was another one that went out a year later, just about 2 years ago, that tried to say not only was Jesus a carbon copy of Horus, but also a carbon copy of Dionysus and Titus and Mithra and Krishna, and started going through all these little details, and then ended with Merry Christmas. And same thing, all of those are false. All of it is completely made up to try to make Jesus look like a plagiarism. There is not a single shred of evidence for any of it. And yet people were being shaken in their faith like John the Baptist was being shaken, except they were not acting like John and asking for what is truth. Let's see it. Let's look for it. Let's investigate. Let's persevere, because in the end, truth wins. And it says Jesus is truth. He wins. That's what's going to happen every time. So you do not have to be afraid to even look into the research, because it's always going to end up. It has ended up with Jesus being the answer for the past 2,000 years. It's going to continue being Jesus is the answer for the next 2,000 years. It's what's going to happen, because Jesus is the truth. So search him, seek his faith. And if someone is struggling in a way you don't know the answer, you don't know what to say, start with the seeking of the face of God. Start there. Take the individual and pray to the Lord and seek wisdom and start researching and talking to people. Figure it out. Don't just say, I don't know, and walk away. Let's speak something into someone's life. Let's seek the face of God. Let's look for truth because it's there somewhere. Have questions. Ask and seek answers. People's faith are lying in the balance of it. And just for your edification and a little bit of humorous enjoyment, there was actually a video that was made to explain this myth. No, I didn't make this one. These people are a little more gifted than I am in that department. These guys are great. It's called Lutheran Satire. It's a group of people that got together and they make little simple South Park-like animations. Not anything like South Park, but in that style of animation a little bit to try to teach the truth by making fun of the opposition.
Well, thanks to all of you for coming out to our service this morning, and I pray that the rest of this Christmas day is wonderful for each and every one of you.
Not so fast, preacher man. Behold, it is I, Horus, Egyptian god of the sun, and while you all believe that you've been celebrating the birth of your Lord Jesus, you've really been celebrating the birth of me. For you see, thousands of years before your Jesus came around, I, Horus, was born on December 25th. I, Horus, was born of a virgin. I, Horus, was baptized by a man called Anup the Baptizer, was crucified and was resurrected 3 days later. So you see, your Jesus is nothing more than plagiarized poppycock, and I, Horus, have come to feast upon the sorrow of you foolish Christians.
Yeah, none of the stuff you just said is true.
Yes, it is.
No, there's no reference in Egyptian mythology to Horus being crucified or resurrected 3 days later. There's no documentation anywhere for the existence of a figure named Anup the Baptizer. Horus's mother was not a virgin woman, but the goddess Isis, and there is no specific date anywhere tied to the birth of Horus.
I'm pretty sure there is.
Actually, no. All of these claims and many others indicating that early Christians yoinked the mythology of Horus and stuck it on top of Jesus were all completely made up by Gerald Massey, a 19th century cuckoo banana-bird self-taught Egyptologist who never provided the slightest shred of evidence for any of these claims and who was laughed out of the room by every serious Egyptologist on the planet. So thank you very much for your attempt to ruin our celebration of Christ's birth, but I'm afraid we're all still having a very Merry Christmas, Horus.
Horus? Did I say my name was Horus? No. What I meant to say was, behold, it is I, Mithras, Roman cultic god of the something. And while you all believe that you've been celebrating the birth of Jesus, you've really been celebrating the birth of me. For you see, I, Mithras, was born of a virgin. I, Mithras, had 12 disciples, and I, Mithras, gave those disciples a meal consisting of my body and my blood. Sound familiar, Christian dummies?
Actually, Mithras was born from a rock, not of a virgin. He had 2 companions, not 12 disciples, and the Mithraic meal was one he shared with the sun god, where they feasted not on his own flesh, but on the flesh of a bull. But even if those claims were true, Christians were already confessing the virgin birth, recognizing the 12 apostles, and celebrating the Lord's Supper before they ever encountered any Mithraic cults. So I'm afraid that you've taken neither the holly nor the jolly out of our Christmas, Mithras.
Oh, you must have misheard me. I'm not Mithras. I'm, Quetzalcoatl, Aztec god of the wind. And while you all think that you've been...
No Christian on the face of the planet ever heard of Quetzalcoatl until the 16th century.
Well, then I'm Balder, Norse god of the...
There were 193 popes before Balder's mythology was actually written down.
Then I'm Horus, Egyptian god of the sun.
You already did that one.
All right, fine. I didn't want to completely humiliate you, but you've left me no choice. I shall now unveil myself to be the ancient deity whose mythology was inarguably stolen by early Christians. Behold, I am...
the ancient Mesopotamian god of judgment. 6,000 years before your Jesus spoke of returning to condemn the lost and resurrect the faithful, my followers proclaimed that I would return to destroy my enemies and raise the dead. So silence your your joyful voices, Christians. Your Lord is nothing but a cheap carbon copy of me, the destructor who goes by many names. I am Volguus Iltroha. I am Lord of the Sibulia. I am Gozer the Gozerian.
Gozer the Gozerian is from Ghostbusters.
Dang it, why do so many people still know that movie?
Sing we joyous all together.
I don't understand. If all the things that Gerald Massey said about me were complete fabrications, with no textual evidence whatsoever, why do atheists like Bill Maher reference these claims as if they were true?
Well, Horace, I suppose it is strange that people who insist that they won't believe anything without verifiable evidence are more than willing to believe anything without verifiable evidence, as long as that thing can be used to mock the gospel. But we shouldn't be surprised when people reject proof of Christ's resurrection in favor of demonstrable lies that let them remain in unbelief. After all, Jesus did say, if they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead.
I said that before Jesus did.
Oh, you absolutely did not.
Jesus of the wind and weather.
So I leave you with the final question. Will you research? Will you stay faithful to the gospel of Christ? And by so doing, I'd like us to do an example of just that, having communion together. So I'll ask the deacons to be able to come forward, and we're going to have communion together as we remember the truth and the reality of Jesus who died on the cross and Jesus who rose again, who sacrificed himself that we might have eternal life, who spilled his blood so that our sins might be forgiven. And here at this church, we do have open communion in that you don't need to be a member of the church to take communion. We just ask that you be a believer in Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. So if you are indeed a Christian, please, by all means, partake of our communion. If you are not a Christian, I would ask that you would come see me, and I would be glad to pray with you and talk to you about that, or at least consider where you're at why you are not a Christian. And when the plate comes to you, simply just pass it right on by. And before we do our communion, let's all stand together and let's sing one song together here, Nothing But the Blood.